Hi everybody, this month we are talking about psychological safety. We put up a blog on our website last month that has gained a lot of interest, so we thought we would spend a video going into the 5 different steps that you can take in order to encourage and enable psychological safety in your workplace. It's a really interesting topic and one that we talk a lot about with clients and one that clients are always really, really interested in learning more about as well. So yeah, we really thought it was worth the time going into these 5 steps that we talked about in the blog and just having a conversation and going into them into a little bit more detail as well. So let's get started. So the first of those 5 is to encourage team members to get involved in decision making. So, Joe, you've dealt quite a lot with clients and talked about psychological safety. You're also our head of academy that talks a lot about psychological safety. So, why is it that encouraging team members to get involved in decision making is a really key enabler for psychological safety?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. It is something that we talk about a lot, and it is something that, as you said, a lot of clients, a lot of academy learners take a lot of interest in, and getting team members to get involved in the decision making. It's allowing people to really feel one part of a team. You're empowering them, so you've got that. You're almost we talk about sometimes the 4 different stages of psychological safety. Some people might be aware of it if you've listened to other videos about the 4 stages with Leader Factor from Timothy R. Clark. And getting people involved in decision making and allowing other people to make decisions as well is you're getting them to that contributor safety. So they're contributing, you're allowing other people to make those decisions. And then that way as well, people aren't going to always just come to you as a leader or a manager or whoever to make all those decisions, because you're empowering other people to make those decisions. So it's just involving people and as we said in the blog as well about being transparent and making sure that other people are aware, because a lot of the time as well people are using OKRs to create alignment, right? How can people align to anything if they're not really sure what they're aligning to? So that's a huge part as well, but it's allowing other people to make decisions, so you're creating that contributor to safety, really.
There's a really impactful TED talk, I think it is, based on a talk by an American Navy captain who used to run submarines, and he was charged with going and running a submarine that he had never he didn't know about the running of this particular submarine. It was designed and built in a very different way to the sort of submarines that he was used to, more people to lead, that sort of thing. And he very quickly realized that not knowing the particulars of the people on board, but also the technical parts of the submarine that he was leading, would mean that he would have to change his leadership style. Normally he was very much, I know what I'm doing, so therefore I'm going to tell you what to do because what I know is right, and so you're going to do it. And he realized that he had to move into a much more create a much more psychologically safe environment, because he realized that the people working for him were the experts. Right. And so what he did, and we can put it into the description of the video because it's a really great talk. What he did was start to transition people slowly. He didn't do it all at once. He didn't give people the authority all at once. Yeah. He started, if someone said, what do I do? He would say, well, what do you think we should do? And then they'd have a conversation about it. Exactly. And go from there. And then over time, he encouraged people to then go, I think we should do this because of these reasons. And allowing people to take that control, but providing the reasons why. And then eventually it moved into, I've done this for these reasons. And it was it's a really interesting way of watching people, especially in a military that's quite hierarchical.
I think that's very, as you said, hierarchical, very bureaucratic, if you like.
Exactly. Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, it's a fantastic watch and a really great example of how you can take a quite traditionally bureaucratic and hierarchical culture through that psychological safety training and encourage the team members to get involved and lead that decision making process. So
Yeah.
yeah, we'll make sure we put it in the description.
I like that as well because for anyone else that's watched our videos before, we talk a lot about the why in general, right? So
Mm, mm,
it just kind of brings into that it's so important that whatever you're doing, really, you've got that outlining the why. But I like as well what you said there, Tim, around he's going to other people because they were the experts in their roles, which again is what we want to do
mm,
with OKRs.
mm, mm,
We
mm.
employ people because of their expertise, and it's about time that leaders in certain businesses then trusted those people with those
Yeah,
expertise.
yeah,
But you're not going to get to that point until you start building that psychologically safe environment, because like you said there, if you go suddenly from one person making all the decisions and being that decision maker, it's going to
mm,
instill a bit of fear really into people when they have to make those decisions in case it's wrong.
mm,
I
mm.
say with air quotation marks.
Yeah,
But yeah, interesting. I think I might give that a watch myself, Tim.
it's very good. Yeah, we'll make sure that we provide the link in wherever the description is that you're listening or watching to this. Um, okay, I think that leads us on quite nicely into the second way of building psychological safety in the workplace, which is being open to feedback. And I love this one because feedback is such a tricky one to navigate. A fine tightrope to walk on never offering feedback and not allowing people to grow, or the other end of offering too much feedback unsolicited and being that person who has an opinion on absolutely everything. So, but at least starting with being open to feedback, which I think we've all met people and probably been that person that, depending on the situation, you may not be that comfortable with receiving feedback. But we know how important feedback is, especially when it's structured in the right way. Being open to feedback that gives you the opportunity to grow and has a conversation, maybe allows a conversation around what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you came to the sort of decision that you came to that's required the feedback. Yeah, I love this one. It's probably my favorite topic around feedback. Something so straightforward.
Is it?
Yeah,
It's a yeah. I think it's one of those as well where if you view feedback in a certain way, I think so. If you like to view it as a bit of a gift, if you like, so you're either receiving that or giving that gift, but either way, that gift can be, well, you can kind of see it in two different ways, right? You can either see that gift as something really, really positive, really helpful, or if you don't like that gift, you can put it on a shelf somewhere, or. But it's one of those where I like this being open to feedback, and I think it makes it easier for other people to give you feedback if you're asking for feedback as well. So you're
yeah,
being that person to ask for it. But I like as well what you said about that conversation piece. I think a lot of people view feedback as a very direct conversation, not even a conversation, just a direct piece of feedback, one way, very much just at someone, whereas it should be a conversation. It should just be, a conversation really with
yeah,
feedback.
yeah, yeah. It's, and often and making sure that there's the opportunity to make it a positive thing, because we you know, naturally, whenever we think of feedback, either as a word or a concept or a conversation, it's generally as a result of having done something incorrectly. And I think that's quite difficult as well when we're talking about feedback and being more open to feedback. The natural response might be, well, I'm just opening myself up to more criticism and to being told that I'm wrong all the time, which um, can't speak for the people who are watching or listening, but that may well be the case, but it also shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
And by being more open to having the good and being more open to constructive and criticism feedback, hopefully also makes you look like you're open to being given positive feedback as well,
Yeah.
and not just someone who goes, well, don't ever talk to them because they don't like being told good or bad things.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, yeah, like you said there, I don't think it's about even having positive, or again, I use the words with air quotations, negative feedback. I don't like that word, but feedback should just be about whether or not you want more of something. So you're reinforcing something you want more of. So I'm straying away from using the words positive and negative, because I don't think it should be seen necessarily in that way, but I think it should just be, yes, you want more of that behavior or more of that to create that impact, and because you're getting a good impact from it. Or we want less of that, or a change in that to create a better impact moving forward. So but I think, and I'm probably talking more around giving feedback as well, but I think being open to feedback and demonstrating that as a leader, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but sometimes sharing that as well with other people. I received a bit of feedback from someone the other day, and actually from that, what I'm now doing is da da da. So you're again sharing that openness as well for feedback. So
I really like what you were saying about the giving feedback as well, because that's something that can be a tightrope to walk if you're being asked for feedback. It's a two-way thing. If someone's being open to feedback, that also means that you've got to know how to give feedback as well, and give feedback well. I found the hard way. A tip that I try is asking, if someone asks me for feedback, I always ask them what it is specifically that they want, because the feedback I'm about to offer might be very different to what they're after. And I find that's a really good way of stopping a very difficult conversation going, well, I was only asking for feedback on this very particular thing, but you've launched into this tirade about something totally different. So that's my hot tip for giving feedback, to make sure you remain friends with the person that you're offering feedback to.
And we love a hot tip, don't we, Tim?
Absolutely.
But and I think the other thing about giving feedback, we probably could talk about this, for hours, seeing as it's as well your favourite subject, Tim, as you just said. But I think the other thing about feedback as well, and I think it ties into what you've just said there, is preparing it as well. So preparing what you're going to say, and really structuring it in a way that's going to be useful, and not just your thoughts on if something was wrong or something was right. It's about making it useful as to why. We always bring it back to the why, whether it's that impact or that takeaway, but bringing it back to this, that we want it to be that you're open to feedback, and it's just about creating that culture where feedback is, as you've said, where it's not feared. It's something that people view it as this is great, actually I'm going to learn from this feedback and I'm going to change something, or do more of this because I know the impact it's having. So I think it's just creating the right culture that feedback is not feared.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good way of dragging us back into psychological safety, because we talked a lot about feedback. What's it in aid of? And it's making sure that that giving and receiving feedback isn't seen as a negative thing, and it's there for the growth of everyone involved. A growth opportunity for the person giving feedback, as well as the opportunity for the person receiving feedback as well. So,
and I guess as well, just finally before we move on to the next point, linking it back into OKRs as well, is feedback is the way that we want to work with OKRs is we want to continually improve the way that we're using OKRs. So actually, when we're doing things like retrospectives or reflections at the end of a cycle, we want people to be honest about what's been happening, but we also want to make sure that they understand that we're open as leaders or whoever in the business to changing things as well. So we want to make sure that we're getting people to understand that we're positively asking for their feedback. Again, I'm using that word again, but for it to be improved in the future. So we want people to be honest and feel like they can be honest with that.
Yeah, fantastic.
Should we move on to the next point, Tim?
Absolutely. I'm now fed up with the word feedback, so let's move on to the section.
It was your favourite, now it's not.
Oh, well, exactly. Who knew? Okay, so the next one we've got that was in the blog post was establishing norms for failure and creating learning opportunities. That's a really interesting one. A lot of places are very hesitant. A lot of people, a lot of places are hesitant around around failing, especially around creating opportunities for failure. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, this is also a really interesting topic, and one that I'm sure, Joe, we could devote hours and hours of conversation around learning and
Yeah.
enabling intelligent failure. So, what's your sort of take on this one, Joe, and why it's important for psychological safety?
Yeah, I think what you just said there, it's the intelligent failure. Like I'm all for people testing and learning and adapting, but I think what
Mm,
we do need to make sure people are doing is that it's not that just failing and never learning from that is
mm, mm,
okay.
mm,
Because if we make
mm,
mistakes, great, we can learn from those. But what we
mm,
don't want to do is create a culture where we just create doing mistakes all the time and repeating those mistakes and repeating them and never learning from it.
mm,
So my take on it is that yes, we want the norms of failure, but we want it to be more of viewed to almost a growth mindset. So we
yeah,
want people to have that culture around, okay, well done. You've put yourself out on a limb here because you wanted to test and you wanted to learn.
mm,
And now what you're going to do is share this learning with other
yeah,
people, and we're going to improve. So it's yes,
yeah,
establishing norms, but it's almost it's making sure that people are doing it in a way that's useful to them and the business.
yeah.
What's your take on it, Tim?
It's so I have so many takes on it. We spoke quite a lot about it in our last video around innovation and around
Yeah,
learning, and I think, yeah, Joe, what you were saying about taking stuff from it and learning from it is absolutely the main thing. Um, it's not being afraid to talk about your own failures, but making sure that you focus on what you learned from it. And that also requires you to be intelligent around when you try an experiment, knowing what it is that you're experimenting.
yeah,
You can't
yes,
just go in and try something and go, well, I don't know what I was looking for, so I don't know what success or failure looks like either way. Um, I think so. There's that. There's putting yourself out there more. There's also the steps that you can take if you're not the person who's experimented and failed. Um, Being how positive you can be around that with that person, and yeah, like you said, Joe, saying well done, congratulating them, learning more about it, and saying what did you do that I can now not do
yeah,
to make sure that I don't make that same mistake, and doing that in a positive way. There's a good phrase that I like about, it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's better to learn from the mistakes of others. And I think that's a really helpful way to think about creating norms for failure. Like, learn from your friends, from your colleagues, from everyone else does, and go into that. Yeah, have that learning cycle and post your failures everywhere and share what you learned from them. That's the best way of making it acceptable to fail. I've seen it so many times where money and time and effort has been pumped into something that is obviously a failure, but people are too afraid to say, hands up, we've
yeah,
made a mistake here, we've got to start from scratch, start again. um the whole sunk cost fallacy around, well, we've come this far, we've just got to keep on
yeah.
plowing ahead. You've just got to know when to quit and start again. So
And when
yeah,
to learn
let's
from
not
that.
let's not have more of that, please.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's all about, like you said, it's the learning opportunity, but it's
Mm,
to create that right culture. It's about celebrating the
mm,
learnings, um, and making that part of like your one-to-one conversations as well. If you've
mm,
got people that are working with OKRs or with
mm,
anything, you're asking them, okay, what have you learned from that? Well
mm.
done. Like you've done something that's probably out of, because it probably is out of a lot of people's comfort zone as well.
Yeah,
If if
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah,
if people are used to, always being, I'm being very careful around the words I use here, because say hitting 100% of targets, or
mm,
someone's very used to being that person who kind of knows everything, or whatever, being that knowledge expert, if you
yeah,
like. It can be something
mm,
that's then really quite scary to put yourself out there and go, I don't know what this is, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I'm
yeah,
going to learn from it, and
yeah,
I'm going to go
yeah,
with it. um
yeah,
so it's definitely about, yeah, celebrating that and sharing when you
yeah,
have as well, like you said there. But like we said, Tim, we could probably talk for we could probably talk for hours on each each one of
Each one of
these
these, they're
points.
great. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I think it's probably time that we move on to the
fantastic.
next one.
The next one. So, what we got for the next one? Creating space for new ideas and goals, especially ambitious ones. I think we're going to latch on to that idea of ambitious ideas and goals, especially in the context of what we've just talked about with establishing norms for failure. But yeah, creating space for the new, especially the ambitious new. Um, I think it's really well linked. You can't talk about creating space for the new and ambitious goals without talking about failure. It's there that they're linked. Um, Once you've embraced and enabled space for people to talk openly about failure, you then enable people to stretch themselves in ways that they never thought was possible before. Um, if someone is never going to set themselves a difficult or an ambitious target in any stretch, whether it's at work or at home, if they are afraid of the prospect of failure and what that might mean, whether that means not getting their bonus, whether that means being fired, whether that means being cast out as a social pariah from your team, you're never going to do it. But if you feel like you are in a place where not quite hitting what you set out to achieve is going to be okay within the realm of, as long as you can demonstrate what you learned from it, then you're going to go away and do things that you never thought you could previously do, and that other people didn't think you could previously do either. So I think linking back to OKRs, that's why we talk so much about ambitious and stretching goals for OKRs, because if you set yourself a target for 110% on something, the worst you might do is hit 100%, which can only be a good thing, especially if before you've only been achieving 60% or 50% or something. So yeah, that's my I love this one as well. This is great, especially leading on from failure. But yeah, Joe, what do you reckon? What's your where have you seen good examples of this, and what do you reckon?
I think it's just linking back to what you said, really, Tim. It kind of just follows on from the creating that right space for learning
Mm,
opportunities.
mm,
Where I've seen great examples of this are where, well, in OKRs really, and letting other people again test things, learn, adapt.
mm,
But I think what I will say on a kind of air of caution, I would say, is
mm,
it's what we're saying. It's creating the space for it. What we don't want to do is allow people to test and be a bit ambitious with things that are
mm,
absolutely detrimental to the business. So I think this is where it's so important that it's just, as a leader, you're creating that space where people
yeah,
can do it, like you said,
yeah,
without that fear of
mm,
repercussion, really. So it's about
mm,
knowing where the right things to test are,
mm,
and what parts, what space really.
mm,
But yeah, it's a hard one, because I think, yes, err on the side of caution of it, but then what you don't want to do is just never give anyone certain
yeah,
things to test
yeah,
for. I think it's almost like a word of warning, I guess, where
yeah,
if you don't go straight in with, if you're not used to this sort of culture or not used to this way of working,
yeah,
build up to it, build up to creating that space,
yeah, yeah,
and establishing, as we said earlier, the learning opportunities for people
mm,
in that culture. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I think I don't want to repeat everything you've just said, really, but I think my views are very similar to what you've
mm,
said there, Tim.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. I think it's one where it links so well with embracing failure, that once you talked about failure, we've talked a lot about creating space and the reasons why that's good. So yeah, I think that's why we're probably sounding like we're repeating ourselves
Yeah.
a little bit, because I think we are. So
It all links.
um,
That's it. It all links
yeah,
together though, doesn't it? So
yeah, exactly. Um, well, let's move on from that one then, and on to our fifth and final way to build psychological safety, is to embrace positive and healthy conflict. positive and healthy conflict, which, for some people might sound like the two things don't work together. How can you have healthy conflict? But I think, Joe, you've probably got some good stuff on this one, and it's one we talk a lot about in the academy, and making sure that we have that space there. So yeah, do you want to give us a little bit of what you reckon on healthy conflict and positive conflict?
Sure. And I think a lot of this comes from the 4 stages that we've spoken about before, from the leader factor. So when we've got our 4 stages and we get past that innovation threshold, into that innovation threshold, and get into challenger safety, what we're aiming to do here is the classic quote that we say from leader factor is, you're increasing intellectual friction to decrease social friction. So what that really means is that, say, me and you, Tim, if we're in a meeting somewhere and we're challenging the status quo on an idea or a business, thing, what we're doing is we're increasing that intellectual friction. So we're challenging each other's ideas, and we're challenging the norm, if you like, on something. But then what we're doing is making sure that if we disagree with something in the business context, what's not happening is our social context isn't decreasing. So if we get off that call, out of that meeting, nothing has changed socially with us. All we've done is challenge each other intellectually to create that innovation. So what we're wanting to do is make that the norm. What we don't want is people just challenging things for the sake of it, or being disrespectful to other people. Psychological safety isn't something where it just allows other people to be disrespectful or in that context. But what we want to do is make sure that we're embracing that, as it says, productive conflict. So we're challenging ideas, challenging each other, but not letting it affect your social side as well.
Yeah, that's it. The way I try and think about it is it's focusing more on challenging the idea as opposed to challenging the person.
Yes.
And making sure that everyone understands and really knows that when, Joe, you challenge an idea that I'm putting forward, that I don't come away from that going, well, Joe hates me because she didn't like my idea, as opposed to saying, the idea that I put forward, Joe challenged the idea as an abstract concept, and it was an opportunity for us to work through that. And I know that Joe, still respects me as a colleague, for example, but is still able to challenge my ideas. So yeah, that's the one. And knowing that, if you work somewhere that you really believe in the mission and the purpose, which is what OKRs are all about, and hopefully most people listening to this do, is that the challenging of ideas where you work, it's all in service of making sure that you can best execute against that mission and purpose, and not feel like it's just interpersonal fights and politics and scrapping and stuff. It's the reason you challenge and have that positive conflict is because you're trying to make something as good as it can be so that you can do the best work possible.
Exactly. It's the intention, isn't it, behind it?
Yeah.
So, and that's where, as I was saying, it's not an excuse for people to use it in a way to be rude or disrespectful to other people. It's making sure that it's coming from that place of, like you said, improving or getting to where we need to be, or challenging. So I think it's just so important, as well, as a leader, that you're consciously thinking about as well, if you're challenging someone, especially as a senior leader, if you're challenging someone maybe more junior than yourself, that you're definitely as well being aware of how you're challenging that person as well. Because it can seem quite scary in certain businesses. If you're a very large company, if you're part of an exec team and you're working with people that you don't usually work with on a day-to-day basis, there could be a little bit of fear there. So again, as a senior leader, if you're challenging things, you're making sure that you're going about it in the right way, showing your intentions, but also someone's going to challenge you again. You're being open to that, and bringing it back to our point, open to feedback. So you're being open and you're allowing that space with the good intentions. So
I really like what you said earlier around psychological safety isn't an excuse for people to be disrespectful to one another, and I think that sums up absolutely everything that we've talked about, both in this part and through everything else as well. It's there to help enable people to increase their social friction, increase the intellectual friction, decrease the social friction. Don't want to get that one wrong.
That's what we're ending with, that end quote.
Exactly, yeah, not going to end with that. And making sure that people aren't disrespectful to one another, because that's not what we're here for. No, exactly. I think with all of that, then that brings us nicely to the end of this topic on psychological safety. I hope everyone at home has enjoyed listening to Joe and I ramble on for this amount of time talking about some really interesting topics, but hopefully our enthusiasm and our excitement about it has shone through, and it's inspired you to go and read the blog, learn a little bit more about psychological safety, and even get in touch with us if you want to see how we can use OKRs to help you increase psychological safety at your workplace. So if that's of interest, do get in touch. But otherwise, we will see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.